I didn't realize that when I got married, that there was gonna be a paper trail that would cost me hundreds of dollars and hours of my life. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, this isn't about voter fraud. This is about who gets to decide who belongs and who doesn't belong. I'm gonna tell you right now, my birth certificate does not match my passport, and I'm lucky to have a passport. I took some money, I set it aside a few years ago, and got one of those, right? They're kind of not agreeing with who I am. I'm this entity that was born as a baby, and I'm this grown ass woman now who has a wholly different name because I decided to get married.
You know what? I'm so tired of trying to figure out why people give a fuck about things that matter so little. But maybe the bigger question is why I give as many fucks the way I do. I'm an outside the box kind of girl. Depth is so much more interesting than shredding the surface. And I'm here to pull you along, kicking and screaming if I have to. Welcome to Alchemized Fucks Given, where we decide the economy of our fucks, stop wasting energy on what doesn't deserve it, and do the real work instead.
I just didn't realize that becoming a wife and mother meant I was going to become a fucking paperwork problem. Like nobody told me about that part. Welcome to Alchemized Fucks Given. It's a new day, a new week, and we've got political stuff to talk about. So today we're going to talk about whether or not you should have to prove your American citizenship and able to go into the voter box and how, as women, it affects us with our body, our space, and our mind. So we're going to talk about that today. So being able to prove whether or not your citizenship counts shouldn't be a thing in this country, right? Most people are not clamoring to run into our voting booth to vote for whoever the dregs are that have decided that this is what they're going to do. Now, and I say dregs, but I really do mean that I applaud anybody that wants to actually go into the service of the people, right? To be representative, to represent people, to make sure that, people's taxes are taken care of, things of that nature. But it seems something weird is going on. There suddenly is this push to prove that citizenship is a thing with regard to people voting, right? But it really becomes an issue when we decide that you have to be able to prove that your name is your name and you are who you say you are. When there used to be a time you would just register to vote when you'd go to the DMV here. And I'm going to say, there are people who are from other countries that live here legally or, and they live in communities and locally they can vote because those local things affect them. On a national level, which is what we're always talking about, it is not the same. So I didn't realize that when I got married, that there was going to be a paper trail that would cost me hundreds of dollars and hours of my life. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this isn't about voter fraud. This is about who gets to decide who belongs and who doesn't belong. So I'm going to tell you right now, my birth certificate does not match my passport. And I'm lucky to have a passport. I took some money, I set it aside a few years ago, and got one of those, right? They're kind of not agreeing with who I am. I'm this entity that was born as a baby, and I'm this grown ass woman now who has a wholly different name because I decided to get married. I remember when it was time for me to change my name, one of the first things I was going to do was I was going to hyphenate my name. I was going to hyphenate it. I was going to be Gabrielle Gibson Johnston. That was going to be my last name. But my ex-husband, ex at the time, was like wanting desperately for me to take his last name because he wanted to be able to have an heir. You heard me say my last name is right, Johnston. I don't know what this is with men and their heirs. Guess what we didn't have? A dude. I did not give birth to a dude. I have nephews who I love immensely, but I did not give birth to a dude. I gave birth to two amazing, amazing girls who are grown-ass women now. And one of them has already changed her name. So I went through this not horrible, but this legal crap that required that I do all this stuff. And I had to change my social security card, my driver's license, every single thing that had documentation that would come in the mail. I had to change credit cards, everything. It was a pain. What is he doing? He's just skipping along, picking his nose, doing whatever, sitting on his patickas, getting to do Nothing, not understanding all the hoops I had to jump through just to take his name. Now I hear him, he's sitting here, divorced, and I want to get rid of it. That's a whole nother thing. So nobody talks about any of that, about what it takes to be able to do this thing, right? So when you get married, like I said, you don't just change your name, you change your identity and who you are on paper. So, but then you get to a point that, say, where I am, you get divorced, you get to pay hundreds of dollars to change it. Again, now listen, I could have changed it when I got divorced, but we had kids and at least one still that was not an adult yet. And it would have cost me nothing had I changed my name when I got divorced. But I thought, you know what? I've got this child out here who would not have the same last name. Now she's a grown ass adult now. She's like, Mom, I wouldn't have cared. And so that's on me, I guess. Yeah. But you do this thing and you're suddenly forced with a choice. You can keep it. And there are people, I have friends who are like, I've got one friend who was like, no, I love my former husband's, my ex-husband's last name. So I'm not changing it because it's better than the name that I was born with. Fair enough. Not everybody got what I got. And the reason I initially wanted to hyphenate my name, I'm going to decide, I was talking about this earlier. The reason I wanted to hyphenate my name is I didn't want to give up my name. I didn't want to give up my identity, but I did it. And now I sit here divorced from somebody who has been less than stellar, shall we say. And I'm in this big, huge mess in order to change my name. And so, whether you change it back, you keep it, somebody who gets married and divorced, your documents are never going to fully agree of who you are ever again. And the thing that voting is not supposed to be something that has an impediment, but I've got a tax in order for me to be able to vote if the SAVE Act should ever become something. So let's just talk about this. Let's talk about the numbers, okay? When we're looking at the situation of women changing their names. If we're just talking about cisgendered women, 79% of women in heterosexual marriages take their spouse's last name. 40% of women have changed their name at some point in their lifetime. The irony on this, considering most of the people that are requesting this, that want to be able to either have, I read a whole article this morning about the men that hate women. It was in the Atlantic by Helen Lewis, I believe the journalist's name was. But they want to take us back to a place where men get to decide who the people vote for. Now, can I just kind of give you a little aside over here? I've been voting a long time. I've been voting since I was old enough to vote. So about 4 decades now, give or take a few years. And I am probably one of the most politically savvy people that I know who talks about politics and policy a lot because it fascinates me because I like to be informed. I think it's important that we all should be informed. But the irony is, when I was married and it came time to vote, honestly, my ex-husband would always come to me and say, who are we voting for? Because he knew I was more informed. So here we have this weird thing where we're thinking, okay, I'm the person who has changed everything with regard to her identity as she came into the relationship, right? She came into this marriage. And I'm voting on things that I feel like are going to affect me, going to affect my children, even affect my husband and people I know, right? And I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing the right thing. And so I'm educating myself. This Yahoo couldn't even be bothered. He's waiting for me to tell him who we're voting for. Somebody whose identity got to say fixed on paper forever, never having to worry about any of the effort it takes to make this change, was always coming to me. The woman whose identity was expected to shift. And now I've reached a point where I've got to prove it every single time. And just a little aside, this weird thing about being a Mrs. I'm living in a place right now where everyone loves to be called Mrs. I am a Ms., not a Mrs., and it's driving me crazy. I think it's weird. And it's just me because we get to a place because we've changed our name. We've taken on a guy gets married. He's still a Mr. I'm about to go on a tangent, on a rant. A woman gets married. She's changed her identity. She's got to change the way people consider what she actually is, as in her whole idea and ID and moniker. So I'm just like Mrs., Ms., and Ms., we're talking about our marital status and what it is. But that's just a whole digression. All right. Men never have to worry about whether or not they do any of those things. So let's talk about the SAVE Act, or as it's titled in the legislation, Safeguard American Voting Eligibility. So basically, what are Congress, the Republicans in Congress and the administration have decided is that we need to make sure we prevent voter fraud. We don't want anybody who they consider to be an illegal to vote. We don't want dead people voting. We don't want all these people voting. And so what they want to do is create these voter ID laws on a national level so that an election can never be stolen. That's a whole thing. So what they're thinking about on a federal election scale is that in order to be able to vote, you would have to provide a birth certificate and possibly a passport. Okay. The reason for this is we want to be able to have election integrity, right? Because they're thinking we're going to have all these non citizens, all these people not born here in America who are going to try to vote. And so they figure if you bring a birth certificate and a passport, that's going to prove that you are who you say you are. There's so many issues with that because the quiet part that they're not saying out loud is that it's going to create this ridiculous, absurd, bureaucratic obstacle for women because your birth certificate is never going to match your passport unless you get divorced, change your name back, and then change your passport. A passport costs on average about $200. And then you go to the court to change your name. That's another $250 to $500. So now we're talking $1,000 just to waltz into that voting booth. So women are getting stuck in this liminal name change space. And it's kind of where we're stuck and men aren't, right? I mean, there's enough situations where men aren't having to show up equally the way women are expected to show up. And so the people that are going to be the most dogged by this, the most damaged by this, women, married women, you might have trans women, anybody that has changed their name at any point is going to run into this. So that's kind of the situation. Now, the thing you need to know right now, the legislation is stalled. It's stalled in the Senate, but you need to understand there's been 3 times this has come up in the last year and a half. In May 2024, the House introduced it, but it died in the Senate. In January of 2025, it got reintroduced at the start of the 119th Congress, so the very beginning of January. It passed the House in April of 2025, but stalled in the Senate this time. Then, in January of this year, 2026, it was rebranded as the Save America Act. So not just the Save Act, the Save America Act. It passed the House again in February of 2026. And right now, it's stalled in the Senate because of that quirky 60 vote threshold. But I don't know. I don't trust it. I think that if they can figure out a way to put it, say, in a reconciliation bill, where they're just trying to figure out another part of legislation, which they do all the time. People stick things in things that nobody's paying attention to. This thing could pass without the needed 60 votes. So people need to pay attention and make sure they understand. Because if we're talking about voter fraud, let's just hit 3 of the states that were considered to be swing states, right? Georgia in 2024, they confirmed that 9 people, 9 out of 5.2 million votes cast were non-citizen votes. 9. In Michigan, they had 5.7 million votes cast, and out of that, 15 were potential non-citizen votes. And then Pennsylvania, over the last 18 years, Pennsylvania has had 544 possible non-citizens voting. 544 in 18 years. And there's this massive push to make voting ID required. There is an estimated 1.2 million women across all of the swing states. So we're talking, I believe it's Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia. At times it's going to be Arizona. There are women who deal with name discrepancies. So 1.2 million women are disenfranchised because there's a name discrepancy. Now, women aren't the only people that run into that. But when you're talking about a situation where somebody has changed their name, say somebody has changed their name in the last year or two, they got married in the last year or two, they've changed their name, especially somebody who may say they were married before. So say you got somebody who they're born, I don't know, Robin Stallwalter. I don't know. I'm making this up, right? And then that's what she's doing. Robin Stallwalter is her name. She decides to get married. So Robin Stallwalter becomes Robin Marigold. So Stallwalter to Marigold. Well, it doesn't work out. They get a divorce. So now she's gone from Stallwalter to whatever I said her name was, to Miller. And so the discrepancies that can occur because of this are huge. And then we're going to get to the point that out of everybody here in America that currently holds a passport, you're talking that's only 45 to 50% of the people. And then you get into the low income areas, and that's 21% of the people. So if we're going to make passports and birth certificates a requirement, we've now created an impediment to getting into the voting booth, right? So basically, we're solving a problem for something that shows up in single digits, but it's going to impact millions upon millions of people. We thought the system at least saw everybody as voters. If you look at the Voting Rights Act, as we talked about last week, and we're looking at the SAVE Act, because best believe, bet your bottom dollar, the SAVE Act is going to come up again. Somebody in the House will bring it up again. And I honestly believe they'll bring it up before the midterms. I think it'll get brought up and it'll be brought to the Senate again. And they'll try to sneak that shit into a bill when nobody's looking. And before you know it, it's going to snatch away a bunch of women's right to show up in the voter booth. What the fuck do we do now, right? What do we do? Listen, we have to be willing to fight for this shit, okay? Not because it's comfortable, because we know politics and the world does not feel good right now, but because your vote is connected to your body, your space, and your mind. We got to dig in, show up, and be ready to tear things down. When they make it harder for you to prove you exist on paper, they are telling you something about how much space they think you deserve to take up. And we don't shrink, baby, not here. So make sure you are paying attention. You are staying informed, and show the fuck up, because that booth is yours. Your name might change, but your rights shouldn't.